data quality is a very broad subject overall, right? But when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about it in the context of how well data is labeled, which obviously translates well for predictive modeling, right? And also just the completeness of data, the ensuring that when you look at numbers in one platform, that they match the numbers in another platform within the same business. And that sounds like something that's extremely easy, but I can tell you from personal experience, a lot of times it takes years to get the numbers in finance to match the numbers that you're crunching in marketing, for example. And so that's holistically, that's really what I'm talking about.
And even after years, I'm sure sometimes it still doesn't mesh up, right?
Of course. In fact, when I knew my work was cut out for me once when I was at a conference and the head of data science for Wells Fargo was there, and he was talking about their journey and how they cleaned up their data and it's pristine now. And so I started asking him, can you elaborate into how you did this? And he said, well, before I go into it, I wanted to let you know that it took 14 years. And I was like, oh wow, okay. And yeah, it just didn't even seem possible. But yeah, I mean, now that's Wells Fargo. They're quite a bit bigger than Palo Alto Networks or any company I've worked for that matter. But still, it just gives you an idea of what a monster data quality can be. Yeah. So just to give you an example, one story I've told a couple of times is, when I started at Palo Alto Networks, I was thinking, data science team that, everything would be free flowing as far as systems, integrated to one another, talking to one another. But we actually had to, in the early days, actually, when we wanted to crunch any kind of numbers or do any kind of predictive modeling, we had to actually go into Salesforce, export the data that we wanted to into Excel, right, or a CSV file. Then offline in Excel, use VLOOKUPs to join the data. It wasn't even quite database ready. We had a database, but we weren't it wasn't all integrated with our Salesforce at the time. So we're having to take pieces of data from all these disparate systems, put them together in CSV format because that was the only format that all systems could produce, and then use Excel and we also we have a tool called Nime that we still use today, that is really good at integrating different sources, and that made our journey a lot easier and faster. But still, it required a lot of manual work and putting that together. And we never could get numbers to match across any org within our business, because people were pulling the information differently, people were defining things differently, and so that's when we decided as an organization that something needed to change, that we needed some kind of level of standardization, that we couldn't have Japan crunching their numbers differently than the U.S. than Italy, right? Being a global business, so yeah, so that's kind of but when we started, it was just all over the place.
I feel like that's a very common sounding operation. Like I've been at many companies where it's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So definitely not uncommon. So how do you like fix that? How do you is it talking the same language first? Like what how do you actually go about fixing that issue?
Yeah, so as I've thought about this and our journey and how I think the number one thing is to get C-level sponsorship, right? Because we tried, so I've been at Palo Alto Networks now for a little over 5 years. And for that first 2 years, we already knew it was an issue and we were trying to fix it, but we would start doing things on our own as a team. We would try to go out there and sell people like why we're doing this, why it's important. But a lot of times, it fell on deaf ears because people, they didn't understand data science. They don't really, they didn't see, and maybe it was maybe we didn't explain it well enough of why, how that could affect the models and how that could affect the analytics and how they're trying to use this information to make business decisions, right? But and and it really, frankly, it was because we didn't have somebody kind of high enough on the ladder that said, you know what, we are doing this as an organization. This is important, and this is what we're doing. And finally, after years, we got we got that sponsorship, that air cover, if you will, where they said, this is going to be something where we're going to make it a corporate priority, and honestly, a lot of these other things can wait until we kind of clean our pipes. I think that was the turning point. And I think that I would urge any organization, whether they be new or trying to go through this journey, kind of years in, that I would say that would be the first step. Because if you don't have that sponsorship, then other managers that are affected by the changes, if it creates more work for them, they're going to be resistant to it, right?
Yep, absolutely. So you get the sponsorship. Obviously, everyone's on the same page in terms of where you're going from that.
Yeah.
Then what? Then what's after that?
Then it is a matter of, part of it is getting buy-in from all the different teams, because in a global company, you've probably experienced this before, there can be resistance to imposing kind of your rule on everybody else, because everyone's like, wait a second, we're not the US, right? We don't, things don't work the same here. And so you can't just come and, bark orders at us and tell me, as a business owner in let's say in Singapore, right? You can't come over here and tell me how to run my business because you don't know my business, right? That's kind of, and so there's a lot of pushback. That's another thing. That's part of why it takes so long, right? Because you have to show people the value, and you have to do it a lot of times in small iterations and baby steps, right? Because people are just distrustful a lot of times, right? Just because, I can't just walk in a room and say, hey, I know this stuff, like take my word for it. They'll be like, no, especially if it causes more work for them and their teams, which it does for a while. But the point is, you have to sell them on the long-term vision that, yes, it's going to take more work, but your outcome's going to be better, your decisions are going to be better, and in the long run, it actually will save time, right? And so that was a big hurdle, I guess. So one other thing that was a critical component, so that those are extremely important, because, like I said, without the sponsorship and the buy-in, you basically don't move, right? You can't have a data science team telling the rest of the company, this is the way we're going to do things, right? It doesn't work that way. So one thing that was extremely important was establishing data sets that we considered the single source of truth for a particular type of data. So, for example, okay, let's say, in Salesforce, everything's about opportunities, right? Opportunities, the amounts, the, line item values, all these things, and everything, a lot of things are centered around that. So the team that was kind of the custodian of that data, kind of we call them the owners, I guess you can say, of that data, right? Well, they create a single source of truth for opportunity data, right? So anybody in the company that needs information on pipeline, on bookings, on anything to do with opportunities, where those opportunities, whether they be opportunity, country, right, or whatever, is in a single data set that, any dashboard, any model, anything that we need that opportunity data for, we go to the same source. That way, when team A adds up the pipeline for a particular quarter and data science team adds up the pipeline for a particular quarter, they're exactly the same because we're using the same source. I think that was another huge game changer. And then, for example, in marketing data science, where I work, we are the custodians of a lot of the campaign data in Salesforce. And again, if another team wants to understand the relationships between campaigns and how they're influencing opportunities, well, they use our campaign data, then they use that opportunity data. Again, now every number is matching, as long as, and of course, there's I'm fast forwarding a bit, because you have to have a lot of meetings to say, okay, how are we defining this, right? How are we joining these data sets? What fields are we using? Those things have to be talked behind the scenes, amongst the technical folks in the project. But I think that again, that was equally important to the other two. The other two, you can't do a project until you get, right. But from a technical standpoint, that was one of the most important, I would say.
That's very cool. I love it. So we're at the point where tables are joined, everyone's on the same page. We're kind of in the present. What are you able
Yeah.
to do with this great aligned data quality and data structure?
Well, so there's a couple of ways this is important. So, in our business, we have the data science or predictive modeling side where we're trying to kind of figure out, what's going to happen next, right? Whether they be the next best action for somebody to take, or whether they be, to whittle down, 100,000 companies into the 1,000 that are the most likely to purchase from us, so to give sales a better strategic, a better handle on their, these mass amounts of companies to, to be able to prioritize effectively. Then the other side of that, and I would say maybe even more important, is the analytics side, because that's what the executives are looking at, right? They're not. I mean, they obviously are very excited about predictive modeling. They're excited that, hey, we can save our sales team's time by giving them focus where they didn't have any before, that kind of thing. But the nitty gritty doesn't excite them too much, right? But on the analytics side, one gripe, and again, I've seen this at every company I've worked for, is wait, I've got this number from sales and I've got this number from marketing. Presumably they should be the same. They're wildly different. And sometimes it's, off by 10%, and sometimes they're off by 30%, and there were times where we would get within 1%, but still to the sticklers, they were like, well, why is it off by 1%? Like, I don't understand. And that single source of truth allowed us to get past that. And so that is, where we are now, which is great. But where the outcomes, or I'd say the importance of data quality really comes in is, so when I'll use predictive modeling as an example. So when we are doing our, training and testing sets, right, for creating a predictive model, um, you know, we typically get higher accuracies in that environment, right? Because it is a train test environment than you would in real world, right? So let's say you're getting an accuracy of 80% in your model in the training and test environment. Well, when you actually say, okay, let's say take a snapshot of companies that we feel are going to purchase from us in the next 90 days, right? Then in 90 days, we look at the companies that actually purchase from us, and then the accuracy can go from 80 down to, 55, right? Well, so when we were doing those, we would see drops like that, sometimes drops of 50% from our train test environment to what we were actually getting. Now, it was better than, thumb in the air predictions, right? We were still doing good things, but it wasn't nearly what we wanted to see. Well, now with the fact that our data is aligned, that it's labeled very well, and what I mean by labeled is, when we get information from third party sources, that we take some time to really understand what data we're getting, what are the limitations. If it's a field that, let's say, the third party provider says, well, yes, we've got this field, but it's only filled in maybe 3% of records. Well, then we probably won't use that, right? Not right now anyway, or we might, evaluate its usefulness, whatever. But but now that our data is so much better aligned and it's so much better labeled, everything from, the way the campaigns are named to the hierarchy of our campaigns, same with opportunities, all that, we're getting like double digit increases in the real world accuracy of our models. And so it just goes to show you of, even though data quality, I mean, I remember when we started talking about this, I really didn't want to talk about it. It's just not something that is sexy, or that, you want to spend your time doing. But, that's really what data science is about. When people pick my brain about wanting to get into data science, I tell them that, 90% of your job is not that pretty. Like the 10% when we're doing the cool predictive modeling and all of that, when we're at the end of our kind of data cleanliness, and then it gets really cool and interesting and you fine tune and all that. But up until then, it's a lot of messy work. And so I think, I wish I had embraced data quality earlier on, because I think we could have gotten these outcomes sooner had I done that. But it's easy to resist just because it's not fun work by any means.
It's definitely the meat and potatoes of the data science world, right? I mean, I love it though. It's so critically important, and everything you were talking about resonates with me. The account prioritization or the propensity modeling, or
Hmm.
under certainly the executive dashboards and analytics that are needed within an organization. All of that really, really, really critical. And it sounds like a lot of it, the majority of it, hinges on having very good data quality from the start,
Yep.
which makes sense. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say that. I mean, I think kind of and I think the reason why is because when the quality is bad, the trust plummets. And I can tell you how many hours, I mean, thousands of hours our team probably spent over the years of wasted work because we would do these things and they would say, well, this number, this dashboard doesn't match this dashboard. I don't know which one to use, so I'm not going to use either. Right. And so, so multiple teams doing work, spending a lot of time, and then the tool's not getting used because people don't know, they don't have that trust. So I think that's a big cost to the business, I would say. I think once you get to the state that we are in at Palo Alto Networks, I think it is starting to get easier. It was harder and harder and harder, and sometimes so daunting you just want to throw your hands up and give up, right? But you just keep plugging away, and I think now we're at a point where I honestly have never felt better about our data at this company, and it's also given me insight, to be able to talk to people like you and kind of share these insights with others, because I think it's important for all companies, all industries, to go through this journey. And so I definitely see it as easier. I think the single source of truth that I talked about, having those type of data sets, I think we will probably do that for every data set in the company at some point. Have, when you need data for X topic, this is where you go. You don't go anywhere else, right? And if you need something added to that, you go to the team who is the custodian of that data. And so I think that will, stay keeping our eye on the ball that way. I think what happens a lot of times is data is a lot of times an afterthought until it becomes a problem, and then it becomes 10 times harder to solve. Well, I think if especially early stage companies start thinking about this and hire people that can kind of help them through that journey in the beginning, so that they don't ever get to a point of just anarchy, which is the way I find most companies operate with their data. I think it just makes things a lot better. And so I think in the future, it's just kind of maintaining what we have, but then at the same time always figuring out ways to make it even better. More automation. We work very closely with our data engineering team on saying, hey, this took a lot of manual steps. What can we do in the future? Like, for example, an acquisition, right? When you acquire a company, there's a lot of messiness that happens. First of all, their data quality now becomes your problem, right? It's not that company, it's our company now. And we know, hey, the way they had their campaign hierarchy in Salesforce is completely different than ours. So now we have to go in and conform their data to ours, which is not easy. So now the conversation is, okay, well, we're seeing some themes. Now we've acquired several companies. We're seeing some pitfalls that we need to overcome. We're seeing some things that went really well, kind of have like a debrief on each one and say, okay, what can we do in the future to automate this and make it so that it doesn't take a team of 6 people working weeks on end to try to integrate these two right the data sets, to have it done mostly automated, and then just have the manual work, to kind of dot the i's and cross the t's and make sure everything is adding up, and that kind of thing. So I think that's where we'll see it. So just spending less time to maintain this state of good data.